Good morning. Happy Easter, all. My name's Sherry. I am the lead minister here. You can call me Sherry or Reverend Sherry. I use them and they and she and her pronouns. And to help us arrive in body in this space, or if you're joining us online, whatever space you're joining us from, we begin in song. And so I invite you to rise in body or in spirit, which has a special meaning today, I think. And we're going to start with Jesus Christ is Risen Today. It's number 268 for those of you who use hymnals. And I invite you to sing out loud, even if these aren't words that resonate with you. Know that it's bringing hope and peace to someone next to you. You all knew all the words, right? Yeah, me too. So I'll take a breath and settle into this space. Welcome to First Unitarian Church of Rochester. Here it is our mission that through spiritual connection in community, we listen deeply to others and ourselves, we open to wonder and transformation, and we serve together with love and humility. We gather together on Sundays to remind us that church isn't simply a place that we come, isn't simply a Zoom link that we click on or a building, but we are a people with a purpose, and we gather to anchor ourselves in our values and stories and music to face the week ahead and to make meaning of the week and time behind us. We gather here in this space on the ancestral and contemporary land of the Haudenosaunee people, and with respect, we thank the Seneca people, the keepers of the Western Door. If you're new or newish here, I invite you to connect with us. Let us know in the chat, and we can help you connect with others, or stop by the welcome desk after the service. After our worship, if you've been coming here for one morning or for many years, I invite you to stay and connect and get to know other people in smaller groups. Get to know this community that you are a part of. I am so grateful to be with you this morning. Each and every morning, we gather not just on Sundays with the work of many hands, but Monday through Saturday, and we live the work of what it means to be this people. I am so honored to be with all of you. And I've got a special announcement, some news around how we might gather next time. Over the past couple of years, we have kept a close eye on public health data, way more than ever I thought I would when I went to seminary. And we have taken as you might note, a more conservative and more cautious view of helping keep each other safe in a big space like this when we've got a couple hundred people in the room. But for the first time this entire church year, the last couple of weeks, our CDC community level has moved from medium to low. And that's really good news for us. Yeah. So we continue to be mask encouraged starting next week, but we won't be mask required. And clearly, I know some of you are elated, you've been waiting, you've been coming anyway, but can't wait to take your mask off. And for others, I know this brings some concerns and some challenges as well. I invite you to speak with either me or Reverend AJ or a member of the pastoral care team. We'll continue to have some things that require masks, but right now, as of next week, unless things change, we plan to be mask encouraged and not mask required. All right, so let's gather our voices and our spirits to light our chalice together. Elise Wall will light our chalice here in the sanctuary, and I'll invite you all to join me in our unison words. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and mysteries of this great gift.
My favorite musicals are rock operas, and my favorite rock opera is Jesus Christ Superstar. I was first introduced to it by my dad when I was in middle school, and it was a really delightful way for this, preteen Unitarian Universalist who otherwise wasn't terribly invested in or interested in the story of Jesus. It was a delightful way to get to know that story a little bit better and in a little different way. The music was great, of course, and there's a lot of attention given to the doubts of Jesus and the sympathetic point of view character that Judas becomes in that telling of the story. A little later on in high school, a touring production of it came through our city, so my dad and I got tickets and we went to go see it. And it turned out the actor portraying Jesus was the same guy who had played him in the movie version in '73 and in many of the Broadway productions. So he was about a 60-something-year-old man at this point playing the 30-year-old Jesus. So that was its own kind of resurrection. And I think they made some adaptations, for the singing for his voice and for some of the blocking. And also there was some, which I believe is fairly common for revivals, to sort of play with the rhythms of the lyrics and the music and just to change things up. But I didn't find any like, oh, this makes me interpret it differently now that they've changed this thing. It just seemed kind of different and not what I was used to. And so the production kind of fell flat for me. And I think this is why we come to church. Because depending on how the story is told, it might be uninspiring or utterly transformative. A story that might not have meant very much to us before might suddenly come to life. And a story that may not hold very much meaning for me might be the most important story to you. So now I invite you to rise and greet your neighbor and say hi on the chat, and perhaps share a song or story or work of art that surprises you how much meaning you find in it, how much you like it. Or just say hi. Say Happy Easter. Dead Stars by Ada Limon. Out here, there's a bowing even the trees are doing. Winter's icy hand at the back of all of us. Black bark, slick yellow leaves. A kind of stillness that feels so mute, it's almost in another year. I am a hearth of spiders these days, a nest of trying. We point out the stars that make Orion as we take out the trash. The rolling containers, a song of suburban thunder. It's almost romantic as we adjust the waxy blue recycling bins until you say, man, we really should learn some new constellations. And it's true. We keep forgetting about Antlia, Centaurus, Draco, Lacerta, Hydra, Lyra, Lynx. But mostly, we're forgetting the dead stars too. My mouth is full of dust, and I wish to reclaim the rising, to lean in the spotlight of streetlight with you towards what is larger within us, towards how we were born. Look, we are not unspectacular things. We've come this far, survived this much. What would happen if we decided to survive more, to love harder? What if we stood up with our synapses and flesh and said no, no to the rising tides? Stood for the many mute mouths of the sea, of the land? What would happen if we used our bodies to bargain for the safety of others, for Earth? If we declared a clean night, if we stopped being terrified, if we launched our demands into the sky, made ourselves so big, people could point to us with the arrows they make in their minds, rolling their trash bins out after all of this is over.
I invite you now into a time of meditation, reflection, and prayer, beginning with shared silence in the sanctuary and beyond. I invite you now into your own breath. Spring is the inevitable response of awakening life after a necessary season of cold dormancy. As natural beings, we respond to spring in spite of ourselves. In the midst of deepest depression, bleakest despair, the spirit leaps at unexpected signs of spring. Easter is a human thing, the hopeful response of self-conscious beings confronting the inescapable death. We choose to believe that out of death and despair, some new thing can grow, some new life can begin, some new hope can be grasped. We choose to believe that death, though a part of life, does not define life. Let us now enter into ritual to bring what is heaviest on our hearts or most present in our minds this morning, and to lay it on the altar of community and spirit, honoring the complexities of life, the grief, the growth, the gratitude alive in each of us. Online, you're invited to share in the chat, and here in the sanctuary, you are invited to arrive at one of the aisle altars and light a candle for your grief, gratitude, or growth. If you would like a candle to be brought to you, please raise your. May we now share in this ritual of community care. And for the world is now held in loving community and by the larger love which holds us all. May it be so. Blessed be. All that a community is what we bring to it. Our time, our talents, our treasures, all combine to create all that our church does for ourselves and for others. Each week we give an offering from the bounty we are blessed to receive to support the work and witness of Unitarian Universalism in Rochester. As part of a spiritual practice of generosity, we split our collection to support the work of justice and caring in our community. This week, we are sharing the plate collection with So Green Rochester. So Green strives to increase the self-sufficiency of Rochester's young people and adults by teaching them the skills of sewing, knitting, and needlework, while supplying the tools and materials they need at low to no cost. So Green is also dedicated to rescuing for reuse everything to do with sewing, knitting, crochet, and needlework. You can give online at rochesterunitarian.org/donate or by Venmo or in our baskets here in the sanctuary. Our offering will now be received with gratitude.
Knock, knock, knock. I was standing at the front door of a friend's home. I had already rung the doorbell, and now I had knocked, and then I even added in a jaunty no, 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 because I thought, well, I'm not sure what to do next. No one seems to be coming, and I'm in this space that feels in between. Do I ring the doorbell again and risk feeling impatient? Will I seem rude? Do I knock again, which feels weirdly even ruder? They're expecting me. This isn't a surprise, but nothing. I'm uncertain. And then the door flies open, and the 6-year-old stands right in front of the threshold and says to me, "What's your favorite plague?" And I see that I had no reason to feel awkward about my behavior. Decorum has flown out the window. Frogs, I say, what's yours? Boils, obviously. Well, listen, kid, my dude, I have had boils, and that is a horrible choice. My ego compels me now to tell all of you that this has more to do with my love of adventure than lack of hygiene. But that's really not the point. I just need you to know that boils are really, really terrible. I won't get into the gory details, but they hurt like hell. The celebration of Passover in Jewish homes this week and the Easter celebration that we find ourselves in right now will not let us forget that liberation is costly, that there's pain involved, and that the promise of good news comes at the cost of what we knew and who we were before. There is no going back to the me before boils. Here at First Unitarian, as Unitarian Universalists, we wrestle with nearly everything. And there are those among us who struggle with the Easter story, with the miracle of it, the unbelievable nature of both death and resurrection, as if death were something we might be able to do away with if we simply ignored it. We say, well, it's not really that different than other stories. I mean, it's not that different than Passover. It's a liberation struggle. There are people going through a thing, and then, well, God intervenes. And there are some key differences here. In the Passover story, of course, there is a long and protracted struggle, and liberation, the happily ever after, leads into more struggle and uncertainty. The Easter story, it's really Game of Thrones-like. It starts with the death of the main character, and then things are good. We struggle with this, many of us anyway. Some might say, well, this is just the pagan celebration of the spring equinox, dressed up in Christian drag. But it's that same celebration of rebirth and renewal, the same celebration when you think that all is lost and the dead of winter is here to stay. Something pushes through the ground. This day is the first day of a year that will culminate in a total solar eclipse here in Rochester. So here is yet another story when all hope seems to be lost and everything you know changes and then returns. Solar eclipse stories almost always bring spiritual resonance and meaning of disorder and chaos. This lies too in the message of the Easter story. On Easter, as we celebrate with a full room and hearts full of joy and a choir that sounds so sweet, we celebrate rebirth and renewal. But just a couple of days ago, the story was something different. Good Friday here at First Unitarian, and in conjunction with our other sibling congregations, we lift up instances of violence and oppression not only against Jesus of Nazareth, a political leader struggling in the context of empire within an ethnic minority, but also contemporary stories of violence against the earth, violence against oppressed people, gun violence, misogyny, transphobia, all matters of death of the spirit and injury to the body. We commemorate these stories because they create within us the space to pay attention to all that should break our heart. And in the words of my wife last year, who the first time in 4 decades of being a Unitarian Universalist didn't complain that I talked about Jesus on Easter, she told me that, well, the Sunday Easter story, it goes pretty well, you know, with that Friday sadness thing. That it does. That it does. Here at First Unitarian, we are fond of a phrase that we put up in a room where we often gather just behind us and our beautiful gardens just outside that says, to live in hearts that love is not to die. We are not a death-denying people. We believe that our bodies come to an end as we know them, especially because many of us experience our bodies as we know them coming to an end again and again in the process of aging, that this feeling of betrayal is not limited to death and yet is particular. But we hold out the hope and the truth that life continues in another way, that the stories and legacy that we live behind in the hearts of people who knew us, knew our stories, and loved us might be moved by the relationships that we had with them to live and love more boldly. To live in hearts that love is not simply to say that the memories that you leave behind live, but that the memories that you leave behind and the heartbreak and grief of your death opens up space in the people who loved you. We come to church not to increase our knowledge, not to learn more facts or knock-knock jokes, but to learn to love more boldly, to create space in our hearts, to remember who we are and how we wish to live. But this story challenges us to find new ways of living, new ways of loving. This story of Easter, of a total solar eclipse, well, they're bigger than the suburban thunder of rolling trash cans that Ada Limon writes of. They talk about reversing everything, turning things around in ways that, quite frankly, to me feel really terrifying. I found myself saying this week to a friend who asked me about the best thing that happened to me this year, that I had a hard time choosing. In some ways, the year's been hard. I've had COVID for 2 out of the last 11 months. There are real challenges, but, well, I know that I am particularly lucky at this moment in my life. That, if I'm being really honest, I might be in my peak year or years. I have a beautiful home, a beautiful family, good friends, a church community that's loving and striving, that creates places of rest and heartbreak and challenge and courage and love for one another. I get to, on most Sundays, look at this beautiful view. My life is incredibly good. And it was an easy thing to do, especially this week, because I looked out the window and it wasn't gray, but it was bright and sunny. And I didn't yet know what I know now, which is it was still cold outside. I am not someone who runs headlong into disorder or chaos or need to turn my life upside down. My life is incredibly good. And yet, Even from this place of incredible privilege, I know that my liberation is bound up with that of other people, and there is a world of more love and more justice available to each of us. What happens when death does not get the last word? What happens when our loved ones whose ashes get scattered in the memorial garden here at church hope that the memories that they leave behind will change how we live? Everything changes. What happens when empire and state violence does not get the last word? What happens when even when the main character of a story dies, we get a symbol of hope, glimmers of spirit, places of recognition where we might know that the story that we carried with us before appears again and again and again? Everything changes. What happens when we remember that we are dead stars? What happens when we remember that the very atoms that make up our bodies are parts of something that died before and yet live again in who we are and how we traverse this earth? Everything changes. What happens when we know that we are not unspectacular beings, as the poet Ada Limon reminds us? What happens when we remember that we are called to be in our power, to claim agency over that which we can change for the better, to seek beauty, and to create comfort and challenge for those around us? Everything changes. What happens when we remember that there is a new world coming and that we have a part in it? That the parts that are good in our lives are not to be lost, but also that change doesn't require us to give up all that we think is good, but rather to open up our hearts and minds to see more goodness already available to us. Everything changes. The Easter story is a story of a world turned around. Disorder comes crashing in, first bringing deep sadness to the followers of Jesus of Nazareth. But the Easter story continues, saying death, the death of all that we knew before, it does not get the last word. When we say Jesus Christ is risen again, we might believe that in a literal sense, but many in this room do not. We might believe that a story rising again and again is a symbol of hope that invites us into a world that has a place for us. We might believe that a story where Jesus' Spirit walks alongside us on the roads that we travel, inviting us to ask always, do we intend to go where we are going? Do we intend to get there without having thought about the destination? And where is it that we would really like to be? Are we traveling with the people alongside us who hold us in our integrity, who ask us to return again and again to hearts full of love? This Easter story, it calls us to grow our hearts, to take all that is hard and challenging and all that lies just beyond our grasp, and to pull it all close to us, to pull it all close to our hearts, and to say, Alleluia, to say, this is a life I was born for. It is mine to live. And I invite you, as we imagine a world turned around and yet full of celebration, a world where all that we knew might become something even better. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit, literally. And I invite you, if you're someone who has really just always wanted to be on the chancel, but you haven't quite had your chance, today's the day. The back shall be front. Because we're going to turn around, and the choir's going to sing to us, and we're going to sing to the choir and to all the folks on Zoom. Because normally, they just see the back of the front row's heads. And I'm seeing some people say yes, probably because they've had that experience of watching. But we're going to turn. So I invite you to turn. And again, join me up here in the front if you'd like the people on Zoom to see you better. And let's sing number 1074, Turn the World Around.
We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain. Go back to the mountain, world around. Oh, so is life. Ah, so is life. Whoa, so is life. Ah, so is life. Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See, we want another clearly. Do we know who we are? Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See, we want another clearly. Do we know who we are? Whoa, so is life a batiwa. So is life. Whoa, so is life a batiwa. So is life. Water makes wash the mountain, fire make the sunlight, turn the world around. Heart is of the river, body is the mountain, spirit is the sunlight, turn the world around. We are of the spirit, truly of the spirit, only can the spirit turn the world around. Oh, so is life a batiwa. So is life. Oh, so is life a batiwa.
I'm going to invite you all to extinguish our chalice together in a moment, but first part of turning the world around is turning church around into connection after worship. So you can join the Buddhist meditation and discussion. We've got parenting matters going on. There's coffee and conversation in Williams. Caffeine is that way. And right here in the sanctuary, join Reverend Shari and myself for a celebration of communion. Now join me in the words to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Roll, move, walk out of this place. Go knowing that the life that you were meant for is just beginning today. Go and claim it. Go in peace and go in love. Amen.
Pardon me? Oh, yeah. Getting full of something. But it's more than
Okay.